Well, thanks for being here. Our state faces big challenges this session. We enter the session facing over $1 billion budget deficit, plus the borrowing from the schools that balanced the budget the last time around. And we also continue to face an economy, although recovering, where the middle class continues to be squeezed and worrying about the economic security of their family and their future. And we also face a political environment that continues, or at least in the recent past, has been a situation where ideological barriers have raised impediments to progress. This session, the Democrats in the legislature, working with Governor Dayton, really do have an opportunity to move past that gridlock, move the state forward with an agenda that grows our economy and make sure that we have a growing economy where the middle class is prosperous and growing, that more and more people are entering the middle class. And our priorities this session are simple. It's really, we're seeing the session through that lens. We want to invest in the things that are going to grow our economy and grow our middle class, and we want to do it in a way that will create a stable and a balanced budget. And we want a state where every child and every person has the opportunity to succeed, where they get a world-class education. Simple stuff, nothing too groundbreaking, but things that we haven't always been able to accomplish in the recent past. We're aware also, of course, that this new order at the state capitol comes with great responsibility. And it's really more than anything a responsibility to govern well. And we are committed to making sure that is the case, that when Minnesotans look at the legislature, they see a legislature that's not always agreeing on everything all the time, but that's working toward solutions in a productive way, and in a way that's businesslike and focused on the best outcomes for the broad majority of Minnesotans. We're eager to get going, to roll up our sleeves. It's an exciting time. It's a time of hope, I think, a time of opportunity. And over the next several months, we really look forward to digging in and at least moving our state forward on these fundamental things, getting a balanced budget, growing our economy for the middle class, and getting restoring some trust that our political system can work.
Well, we just sent out a media advisory that actually tomorrow at 10 o'clock the Senate is going to unveil a list of what we probably call priority bills, and we will have our Senate authors there to talk about them. But today I just wanted to take an opportunity to take kind of a 35,000-foot view of what the Senate is thinking about relative to not only this biennium, but this term, this 4-year term for the state Senate. And I'm a little bit troubled by some of the comments that the minority leader in the House has made. And I saw something on the news last night that it shouldn't be that hard to balance $1 billion problem. We balanced a $6 billion one. I think that kind of rhetoric is not helpful. And leaders very much set the tone for the session. I would hate to have to make the argument that the last biennium was successful and the last budget cycle was successful for Minnesotans. Remember, we had a 20-day government shutdown to resolve a budget. And the final outcome was historic borrowing from our schools and securitization of future revenue out of the tobacco settlement money for the next 20 years. $757 million of borrowing to resolve this current budget that we have. So it was hardly a story of success. So I think a word of caution to the Republicans that are lamenting their great work of the last 2 years, cool your jets a little bit. We don't think you were all that successful. We think Minnesotans didn't think you were all that successful, or they wouldn't have given Paul and I the opportunity to lead the legislature for the next 2 years. So leaders set the tone, and mine is going to be one of trying to include the Republicans to the extent that they want to be included. I thought Senator Hand's comments on the floor yesterday were appropriate. And we're going to try very hard to engage the business community. And Paul and I met with a group of representatives of the state chamber earlier this week. That's the third different meeting I've had with representatives of our state business community. And there's a couple things I think people need to accept. We are not going to pass a budget that relies on continued borrowing. We're not going to pass a budget that has accounting gimmicks in it. We're going to have an honest conversation with Minnesotans about the challenges that we face. as a state? And how can we build towards a structurally balanced budget? And it may take us more than one biennium to get there. But my overall goal over the next 4 years will be, whether I run again or not in 2016, is that the budget that we hand off to the legislature coming in 2017 is balanced. And I feel sorry for this group of new freshmen coming in that are all excited. They worked hard to get here, and the first thing they learn is, and you can do the math however you want, there's a $1.1 billion deficit. If you figure inflation, it's 2. And you can't deny that there's not some inflation in the budget. We can have a conversation about whether it's $900 million or not, but those are MMB's numbers. An additional $1 billion of borrowing from schools brings you up to $3 billion. The securitization of the tobacco bonds is another $750 million that was borrowed in this current biennium. So this new group of freshmen are coming in very excited about their service in the legislature, facing what approaches a $4 billion problem. And that's just the honest conversations we want to have about with Minnesotans about tax reform is going to be very closely linked to the budget. And we're going to put all those revenue pieces on the table, the sales tax, the income tax, the property tax, invite the Republicans and the business community to the table. What can we do to balance the state budget and not do any damage to pretty fragile economic recovery? So I'm looking forward to having that conversation in a bipartisan way along with the business community as we try to move this state forward.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Thank you very much. That's good.
We put you in a few more seats.
We'll work on that for you, okay? Yesterday was the first day of the 2013-14 biennium and the first day of this new legislature. And I thought that it was a good first day for us. And we set, I hope, a tone of hopefulness for the people of Minnesota, and one where we're going to demonstrate our commitment to working together with everyone in the legislature to try and find practical solutions to the problems we face. As I traveled across the state over the last number of months talking with Minnesotans, it was clear that they were really tired of gimmicks and tired of ideological distractions. And in the face of real issues for the middle-class families across the state, they want real solutions. And our caucus is really committed to that. But I want to be clear that with any caucus or any legislative body, especially in a democracy, we're not always going to agree. And I think one of the strengths of our caucus is that we are a big tent, and we come from all parts of the state, and we represent different perspectives. And so we're going to be like a choir. Sometimes we're going to be in great harmony. Sometimes there are going to be some tunes or tones that are going to be a little off. But in the end, I think Minnesotans will measure our success by the results that we deliver, and we're committed to delivering practical solutions to the problems that Minnesotans face. So, yes, we may disagree sometimes, but out of those disagreements come the strength of real practical solutions that Minnesotans are asking for. And I think as we represent our various districts, those voices will come together and we will make decisions for the future. The one thing I will say is that disagreements that you will hear from us and you will hear them are not going to lead to a government shutdown, and I think that's pretty good news. And I finally want to say, and I'm glad to see some of my Republican colleagues in the room, we're going to work very hard, and there's plenty of room for my colleagues in the Republican caucus to meet us in the middle, and to work for practical solutions. I think you're going to be happy to see the work out of our caucus. I think Minnesotans will be happy with the tone, and I look forward to that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Katie Stephen from Cottage Grove. I just wanted to add that we started off the morning, and I think we've started off this legislature in a very setting a great tone. We had a good first opening day, and today we just popped over, all of us, from the One Minnesota Conference, where we will go back to. We've had a number of speakers. Vice President Mondale and former Congressman Gutnick addressed the legislature this morning, talked about practical ways that they think that we could work together as a body, allow for collaborative input from both sides of the aisle, but also for ways that all Minnesotans can engage the legislature to help us come up with real solutions to some of the challenges that we're facing as a state. So we look forward to this legislative session. We reach out to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to say that we're here to work together, although we may control three different both bodies of the legislature and the governor's office. We're all here to work together as Minnesotans. Thank you.
specific about how you're going to do some of the stuff that's pretty vague and ambiguous? Starting with the expanding economic opportunities.
Oh, on the yes. Well, I mean, a lot of the things that we, have been talking about for quite a long time. Investing in education, particularly early childhood and higher education, is going to create more opportunities for people. Some of the job development ideas that are out there that we can think about in terms of. We run a trade deficit in Minnesota. We can expand our export capacity, working with the private sector to do that. That's going to create economic opportunity. The way we look at our tax code is going to be a way that we can create economic opportunity, and that's going to be one of the goals as we have this tax reform discussion. How are we going to make Minnesota both a state where we have a fair tax system, but also one that's competitive? And we're going to be working through those items. So there's any number of things that are going to move us in that direction. Trying to take the squeeze off property taxes is another example in the tax code where that allows middle-class Minnesotans to be able to expand their own opportunities, spend money in local stores and that kind of thing.
Well, what does tax fairness exactly mean?
Well, making sure that at the end of the day, it's making sure that everybody is it's transparent, that people are paying their fair share. So that it means a lot of different things. That we're not giving certain loopholes to certain companies necessarily that don't make sense anymore, as opposed to spreading the burden more evenly. So there's a lot of components that go into
What does
that.
fair share mean?
So
That you say that you want to make sure all taxpayers are paying their fair share. What does that mean?
So I think that's going to be part of the discussion. But as we know in our state and local tax system, as an example, richer Minnesotans are paying a little bit less of their incomes in terms of percentage of their incomes in terms of taxes as other people. But it also takes place both in the loophole in sales taxes, where there's certain things that are taxed and other things that aren't. There's a lot of things that you can look at in the bucket of fairness.
How about get the job done? Does that mean you're going to get done on time? Do you guarantee that?
Yeah, we're going to get done on time. Yes.
Early?
We're going to get done on time.
What are some examples of those?
Can I put a caveat on that?
Yes.
The Speaker and I actually shook hands this afternoon that we are not going to participate in a state government shutdown. Now, one little caveat, we haven't talked to the governor about that yet, but I assume he's not going to want to go through another one either yet. But as far as getting done on the constitutional adjournment date, I mean, clearly, we can do what we can do, but at the end of the day, we need a governor's signature on bills. So I do think we've got to see the governor's budget, see where his priorities are, how they fit in with our caucus priorities. All the caucus members just spent months and months and months out knocking on doors, and they're coming to the legislature with things that they've heard. The governor hasn't as recently been out there. So I think we probably have, members of the legislature probably have a little closer pulse on where the public is at today than probably the governor does. So we look forward to trying to make the legislative argument to the governor about where we think Minnesota citizens' current priorities are.
You guys are both familiar with the budget up and down. What are some examples of loopholes that you think the time has passed that need to go away?
Yeah, I think that's a discussion that remains to be seen. That's what this session is going to be about.
Do you think with President Obama's tax plan that was approved that raises taxes for high earners, does that limit the state's ability to then increase taxes on high earners? Is there a point where it becomes too much and it becomes unfair to those high earners between the federal and the state?
Well, first an example of where we would propose to do something. I actually met with a couple of our Fortune 500 companies in the last couple of weeks. And one of the questions that I asked them, and here's a specific example, Brian, the foreign royalty subtraction, the corporate loopholes that you hear about where we allow our Minnesota corporations to do work offshore to bring revenue back to Minnesota, and we exempt 80% of it from Minnesota income taxes. I think there is a reasonable conversation to have with Minnesota's business community because they're paying federal corporate taxes before it ever gets to Minnesota. So is the little spiff that Minnesota gives them by not charging Minnesota income tax, corporate income tax, is that the best use of that $100 million or so? And I think those are the kind of conversations we want to engage the business community. And that foreign royalty subtraction has been around a long time. It's very, very expensive. It may well be still the right policy. But I think having a conversation about some of those deductions and credits that we have and see if they're still the best use of those state dollars and I'm not proposing we get rid of it. I'm proposing we have a conversation about, is the foreign royalty subtraction best, or is it better maybe to redirect that money to something like research and development credits? And what really is the policy that would drive economic development and job growth in the state? And we're very much looking forward to have those kind of conversations with the business community.
What about the income tax rates? Is there a point at which it has too bad an effect on the economy to raise the rates on the wealthiest at both the federal and state level?
Sure, of course there's a point where that becomes the case. And to your question, I think that's part of the consideration we're going to have. But it's also an issue that the governor cares very deeply about, and he certainly is an important player in this conversation as well.
Given, gentlemen, that the wealthiest Minnesotans are mentioned in your bullet point, is it reasonable to assume that for reasons of tax fairness that you are going to support increasing top bracket income taxes in some way, shape, or form?
I think this is the important point. First of all, to answer your question, that's certainly going to be part of the conversation, and many members of the House have voted for that within the last year. And so, it's something that is on the agenda. But the more important thing, I think, and that's why we need to really embed this conversation in the larger tax reform, is because it's not really. That's kind of the means, right? And we need to talk about the different ways that we can either raise revenue, keep revenue the same, change how we raise revenue. It's more important what we're going to be investing in, and I think that's the conversation we need to have. So if we want to have a state where we're not making huge cuts to higher education, as an example, but want to start kind of restoring our investment in higher education, which is one of the tickets to a competitive economy, we need to figure out a way to pay for that, right? And some of it could be through cuts, and I know that there's going to be cuts in this budget. Part of it could be through raising revenues. If we want to invest in early childhood education, which also clearly the studies all show, it's going to have a great impact, not just on kind of the economic opportunity in the state, but the lives of so many children. If we want to invest in that, we need to figure out a way to do that. And that's the conversation we need to have. Too often, this conversation about tax and spending gets caught up kind of in this, well, you're going to do this rate or you're going to do that rate. What we really need to talk about is what kind of budget do we want to build for Minnesota that's going to set us up for the long term, for the next decade, for the next 15 years. And some of that is new investments, some of that is getting rid of stuff. And to people who are going to ask me, I don't know exactly what that getting rid of is going to be, but making cuts and then looking at our tax system to be able to support that, and not just support it this year, but support it for the long term, because taxes are a means to raise revenues to do some of that stuff. It's also the way we reform our tax system is a way to grow our economy more effectively. So I think you can't just pick out that one particular piece.
And you're talking about education, investing in education. There's a lot of talk about early ed and higher ed. How do you do that for early ed? There's been a lot of talk about expanding these scholarships for preschool child care programs.
What do you if you're more? I mean, we can go to people that are experts
is it
on it.
Something like that, or thinking differently amongst that? And also with higher ed, there's a lot of talk about, especially after the Wall Street Journal article with the University of Minnesota, looking at different ways of funding higher ed and investing in that. What are some ideas that could be out there?
I think that specifically in terms of early education, there will be rigorous debate in the committees in both bodies about exactly what you're saying. How do we spend those very limited resources right now? Keeping in mind that there are great expectations that were put on the legislature from outside groups and from the public that they want to see more investment in early childhood, recognizing that there's not new money that's available at this point to do any of that, but I think that the things that will be on the table are, like you said, expanding the STAR, or that you talked about, expanding the STAR rating system so we're actually measuring quality when we deliver scholarships for early childhood education, running the gamut from that to making more of those scholarships available, to investing in all-day kindergarten, to looking at what some of the school districts around the state, including some of those that I represent, are now offering 4-year-old preschool programs in the public education system. So I think that it will all be part of the mix and a debate, recognizing that there's very limited resources available.
Senator, in that area of early childhood, pre-K education, recent study, Head Start based, I think, showed that some of the benefits of this really don't carry through first, second, and third grade for a fairly significant number of students. I'm talking about the pre-K. They come into kindergarten ahead, but then some of that benefit seems to taper off. Does that concern you that might not be the best investment of the money?
Well, I'm not familiar exactly with what study you're talking about, because many of the studies that certainly that Art Rolnick has worked on and others have worked on do show that if you make early investments so that children, our youngest children, starting at 2 and 3 years of age even or younger, if they have access to quality child care and educational opportunities starting at that young age, that you do see measurable impacts in the third grade on reading levels, most especially. So, but again, that will be something that the education committees will delve into more thoroughly this session.
Let me say something about the University of Minnesota, because I think all legislators were very troubled by the Wall Street Journal article. And that is not a place, front page of the Wall Street Journal, where we want our flagship university. We take that very seriously. I actually personally met with the chair of the Board of Regents yesterday. Today, Senator Bonoff and I sent a letter to President Kaler requesting that he report back to the legislature by mid-March some way, with at least a preliminary report of kind of how we compare, for instance, to the other Big Ten schools. I mean, are our administrative costs just out of sync with other Big Ten universities? So we take that article and how the university responds, and I think the accountability and the oversight that regents have over our president and our university very seriously.
Will their funding at the University of Minnesota depend on how they respond, or is it going to be affected by the bloated administrative cost investigation?
I think the President Kaler wrote a response to the Wall Street Journal article. I think the university's success at the legislature is dependent on kind of how they react and how they respond to the criticisms.
He's not denying it so much as he is saying it's completely out of context, not true.
Well, I think it's little to do with President Kaler. This was, maybe the administration before him and the one before, as this is built up over time, and I don't think it necessarily reflects on his leadership, but we certainly want to know how he's going to respond to the criticisms.
Along on a different subject, you fired a shot across the bow at Republican leaders in the House, saying they should cool their jets, saying you didn't appreciate their rhetoric. Why do you care? You are in control. What does it matter? You can pass what you want.
I care because I feel very strongly about having an honest conversation with Minnesotans about the challenges that our state faces. And if we continue to tell Minnesotans there's not a problem, that we balanced $6 billion when that was not done, or we wouldn't be facing a multi-billion-dollar problem right now. I just think it doesn't represent the facts of the challenges that the state faces. And that's important to me because I believe in Minnesotans. And I believe if you tell them the facts and you tell them what the challenges are, they will respond accordingly. Because I do believe we're going to pass a budget with new revenue in it. And it's going to have spending reductions in it. Both of those things, and I think that's what most Minnesotans expect. But if we lead them down the path and continue to lead them to believe that there's not a problem, they're not going to accept very well the fact that there's going to be some new revenue in this next biennium.
This list of spending cuts and revenue increases?
I don't have a number yet, and that's simply because it's much easier for a governor to put a budget together because he has at his disposal all of the state departments. And clearly the people in the departments have a better pulse of where they can create efficiencies and where they can maybe consolidate some things that they do and work more closely maybe between departments. And I expect the governor's going through that exercise now. We'll be looking forward to what he brings to the legislature where they can find some spending efficiencies. I know there's going to be cuts in his budget, and they'll be significant. And on the revenue side, we're looking forward to having a conversation with Commissioner Franz about what he has heard as he's traveled around the state. He's held, I believe, more than 100 public meetings around the state and taken input, and many of those have been with chambers of commerce, taken input around the state. So I think until we see what the Commissioner of Revenue's meetings have led to and where the governor can find some efficiencies, I think it's a little early for us to assume there's some percentage breakdown.
Can you talk about you don't think you're going to be able to balance the budget structurally in 2 years and why you think it's going to take 4 years?
That's a question.
Well, I think the number's just too big. The challenge is too big, I think, to be able to hand off to the next incoming legislature, the 89th, a perfectly balanced budget. For example, the securitization of the tobacco revenue. We sold $757 million in bonds. On June 30th, that money is all spent. And for 18 years beyond that, we're going to have to pay for those bonds. So we've left a hole for 18 years going out, and I don't know if I think it's unlikely. In fact, I'd say we're not going to be able to patch up that bit of borrowing, but that's borrowing against future revenue that I'd like to be able to clean up. And just so you know, the interest on those bonds this year was $74 million. $37 million of it was interest. And it's the same situation next year. $74 million worth of debt service, $37 million will be interest. So fixing something like that, and I would argue we don't really have a structural deficit until we repair some of the long-term borrowing like that that's been done.